Right, so the majority of us, when we first start out in this hobby, we'll have a reasonably sized tank. We'll have a bit of gravel in it, we'll have plastic plants, pirate ships and skulls and all that daft stuff. But we usually start off with fish like, when I had my first tank, I started with guppies, platies, swordtails, few tetras here and there. So really simple fish, hardy fish, that you can just whack in a tank, community fish, that will just get on together. And that's how we find our feet in the hobby. But after a bit, you know, when you've been in a couple of the fish shops and stuff and you've seen what else is out there, you start fancying doing something a little bit different. These fish really easily catch your eye. They're readily available in most fish shops. They're hands down the most colourful fish in the hobby. Freshwater fish, that is. And they're really active, really personable. So they very easily catch your eye when you go into the fish shop. So you've just found your feet, you've had a play around with your guppies and your platies and your swordtails, and you fancy something a little bit different. This can very easily be the first bandwagon that you jump on because of how attractive the fish are. So there's a lot of things to consider when you do jump in at the deep end with these fish. They are very different to your beginner fish. So they're more challenging to keep. They have high aggression levels. Some of them grow quite large. So it's good to know what you're doing or have an idea of what you're doing before you sort of see these tiny little fish looking all beautiful and you take them home and you put them in a 20 litre tank. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you my top 10 tips on how to keep African cichlids. They are just tips, so they're not must-dos or things that you have to do to have these fish. But the things that I've learned over the years of keeping them, the things that have helped me keep healthy fish, keep a nice looking tank. So tune in, listen to them all. Hopefully you can pick up a thing or two and then you can integrate it into your tank and how you're doing your setup when you first start keeping these fish. So tip number 1 is tank size. So I would always say start as big as you possibly can from the get-go. When I say that, I say it from experience. I don't mean to say you have to have a massive tank to keep these fish. This is a tip from personal experience. So always get the biggest tank that you can fit into your house, as big as your significant other will allow you to have. Because I promise you that getting a bigger tank from the get-go will cost you less money. Because all that will happen, I have spent unfathomable amounts of money on tanks.
Write down any number on this piece of paper and I will pay it.
All that's going to happen is you're going to think, oh, I'll start off, I'll get myself a little 3-foot tank, and then you're not happy, it's not big enough. So then you'll get rid of it, and then you'll go and buy a 4-foot tank, and then it's not big enough, and then you'll get rid of it and you're going back. Just start big from the get-go, because you'll end up buying a bigger one anyway if you're really into the hobby. That's my advice from my experience. Not only that, I would give that advice to anybody with any fish of any kind, any species, any genre. Start big, because you're going to want to go bigger anyway. It is important with peacocks, if you're keeping an African cichlid tank, not so much with your mbuna, your rock dwellers, but with peacocks, they do get quite big. And then also, if you've got a bigger tank, it allows you to start getting your haps in there. So your bigger haps, your predatory haps. So the Malawi eye biter will get big. The Venustus cichlid here, he'll get big. My Livingstone will get big. The Star Sapphire will get big. So it gives you a lot more variety from the get-go to get what fish you want. So it gives you a lot more choice on what you can have, variations of colour and species. And we all want the best fish. Bigger tanks, there's a more water volume, they're a lot more forgiving with your water parameters as well. And they just look a lot better. You can get a lot more fish in them. So yeah, go as big as you can from the get-go, and then you won't be disappointed. It'll give you a lot more variety. Right, tip number 2 is adequate filtration. So invest in your filtration early on. Get yourself something decent. I use the sump. The sump's my favourite thing to use on the bigger tanks. So it gives you lots, if you've got a lot of room underneath, get yourself a sump in. Gives you loads of room for filter media. Gives you loads of room for equipment. So it really helps control the excess waste you get from these fish. And they do produce a lot of waste. We tend to overstock cichlid tanks, so we tend to put a lot of fish in them. So it is vital that we have adequate filtration that's going to take care of the waste for the best health of your fish, and so your tank's looking good. Canister filters are also another really good option for this. I would say your sump or your canister filter are a minimum for these sort of fish. You can get your in-tank filters, but these two do a really good job. So one of my favourite canister filters is the FX6 by Fluval. Really, really good canister filter. You can get loads of media in it. It's got a good flow rate on it as well. So it really helps turn over bigger tanks. You can get them in smaller sizes if you've got a smaller tank as well. And then Eheim also make a really good canister filter as well. I've owned both of them, and they've both done really good jobs on the tanks that I've put them on. So if you want to get a canister filter instead, and you're a canister filter guy, then those two are the ones I'd recommend. But adequate filtration is a must-have on these fish tanks, just because they're big, they get big, they produce a lot of waste, you feed them a lot, so it's important to have it there. Right, number 3 is a sand substrate. So you always want to make sure when you're setting up a Peacock and Hat tank that you use sand substrate. The reason for that is they have this habitual natural behaviour of coming down to the bottom and sand sifting. So they'll filter through the sand, they'll put it all through the mouths, through the gills, to try and find food in the sand bed. Which, if you have gravel, is obviously restricting the fish from being what they are, because that's what they do in the wild. This is a substrate they have in the wild. But also, because they do it habitually, if you've got large stones, sharp gravel, anything like that, it damages the fish's mouth and it can harm the fish. So always use a sand substrate with Peacocks and Haps. And Booners are a little bit more forgiving, so you can use larger grain substrates with them because they're not really sand sifters. But even with them, I would say use sand or a fine grained substrate. A lot of people will implement crushed coral, what you usually use for reef tanks, which is a good idea because what you'll do, you'll get it in bags and it's like crushed bits of coral, and you can get aragonite sand as well. And it comes in big bags and you can just put it into your tank. It can be very fine grained or slightly bigger, but it works perfectly for African cichlids because not only does it allow them to use their natural behaviour, but it also affects the water parameters in a way that's beneficial for African cichlids. So because it's sort of calcium based aragonite crushed coral, the calcium carbonate will come out into your water column. It'll help keep the pH stable. It'll give you nice hard water, which replicates the natural environment. So it is a really good one to use. The reason I don't use it, and I'm not a massive fan of it, is because it's white and it shows any sort of algae blooms, diatom blooms, which you're going to get. When you get them on that sand, it's really noticeable, and it really bugs me. Obviously, if you keep on top of your maintenance, you're doing your sand siphoning, then you know it does look amazing. It looks really good when it's fresh. But when I've had it in the past, I've always had these little tints on it here and there where it really bothers me. So I've gone for the sort of riverbed substrate here, which is calcareous. You can ask people in your fish shop if the sand in your substrate is going to affect your water parameters, and they'll tell you. But the reason I've gone for this one is obviously because it's darker. It doesn't show up the algae as much, if there is any. And then obviously with the black background and everything, the contrast on the fish is really good on it. But yeah, all the time for peacocks and haps, sand substrate is beneficial for the fish. It lets them be natural. It replicates their environment. So always use sand in your tank. Tip number 4 is invest in some wave makers. So wave makers, power heads for me is a must have in an African cichlid tank, especially your peacocks and haps. We've already spoke a lot about flow in the African cichlid tank. So if you go onto my last video, we talk all about flow and power heads, wave makers on there, how it's beneficial to the fish. So get onto my channel, watch the flow video, and then you'll learn a little bit more about why we implement them into African cichlid tanks. Right, so tip number 5 might come as a little bit of a surprise to you, but it's something that I've started doing over the last couple of years, which I never used to do, which has actually worked out quite nicely for you. So tip number 5 is make a stock list. So what I mean by a stock list is get a list of all the fish that you want before you start filling your tank up. So African cichlids come in numerous varieties of species and types. So peacocks will come in all different types, colours. You get all your different haps, which will grow to different sizes, different colorations, predatory haps. So if you make yourself a stock list, there's 2 benefits you get from it. One is you're more likely to do research on the particular fish that you're looking to buy. So you'll find out more about it, how big it grows, what its temperament's like, what the aggression's like. And then also, it stops you from impulse buying when you're in the fish shop. So if you've got a list of fish that you want in your tank and you can visualize how that's going to look, it stops you going into the fish shop and just buying fish willy-nilly. We've all done it. So we've all gone in the fish shop, we're looking at the fish, there's a couple of fish there, they're 3 for 40 quid, and you think, oh, I'm just going to get 3, and you'll end up getting one that you don't really want, but you're just going to get it because you're there. You'll bring it back to your tank, and then you'll be looking into your tank and you'll think, oh, I don't really like that fish. So if you make a stock list, it gives you a plan, and it helps you visualize your tank and what you want in it. And then you're not going out impulse buying fish that you don't really want just because you're at the shop. And then the result at the end, you'll be really happy with, because you'll have all the fish in there that you visualized in your head. You'll have a good variety of fish. You'll know what tank size you need. You're not going to have fish that are getting too big for your tank because you will have had them on your stock list. You will have done a bit of research on them. So make a stock list. I've started doing it. I've had great results from it because I'm not impulse buying fish. And all my tanks since I've been doing it, I've been really happy with. So tip number 5 is invest in some semi-decent lights. Make sure you get LED lights, because LEDs are really good at making the colours pop on your fish. Also, make sure you get dimmable lights, so you can change the amount of light input that's going into your tank. And programmable lights preferably as well, where you can put them on a timer and get them to come on at certain times. You can get sort of timer sockets as well you can plug in, but African cichlids, they don't need a lot of light. And all it's going to do is if you put in 12 hours of light, 10 hours of light on your tank, it's going to cause you algae issues. The fish don't particularly like it either. So get something programmable. I would usually have the lights off at this time. I have them set to come on at 5 o'clock. They ramp up over 2 hours. So they don't come on full whack straight away. They ramp up over 2 hours. And then I have them on in the evening when I'm at home, when I come back from work, and I can enjoy the tank. It's all you need on an African cichlid tank. So get yourself some LEDs. Get LEDs that are dimmable. And then if you can get programmable ones as well, even better. These ones are overkill. These are AI hydras. They're carried over from a marine tank. They're really expensive lights. You don't need to spend this much money on them. However, I am really enjoying having these on this tank because you can really play around with the spectrum, and you can get it just right so that it really makes the colours of your fish pop. So if you're one that's into all your gadgets and you want to spend a bit of money and have something fancy, get some of these lights because they are really good, but you don't need to. You just need something that's dimmable, programmable, and definitely LED lights. Tip number 6. Get yourself a temperature controller. So they look like this. I use an Inkbird temperature controller. One of the best bits of kit I've bought for the fish tank in general. So they come with 2 probes that sit in your tank, constantly read the temperature of your aquarium. You can set it exactly where you want it to be for your tank, whatever temperature your fish want to be at. And what will happen is if it gets too low, or if you have a heater fail on you, then the alarm will go off in your house. This one's also app controlled, so it'll ping a message to my phone, it'll let me know if the temperature's dropped, and then I know if the heater's failed and I need to come back and do anything about it. Heaters do fail, and they fail quite frequently, no matter how much you spend on it. So a piece of kit like this, 100% would advise you get. Not only will it tell you if the temperature's too low, but if the temperature's too high in summer months, it'll also kick the heater in your tank. It'll kick it off. So not only will it preserve the life of your heater, it'll save you a bit of money on electric as well. So if in the summer months, your tank's getting too hot, temperature controller will know, and it'll flick your heater off. And then obviously you don't run the risk of your tank getting too hot. So tip number 7 comes in when you're first setting up your tank. So when you first set up your tank, you've not got any fish, it can be very easy to start banging in loads of stuff and building it up so there's something to look at and it looks nice. But bear in mind, this is particularly with Peacocks and Haps, you need to be scaping low down and minimal. So you don't want things that are high up, rocks stacked up at the back. You don't want loads of stones in there taking up all the bottom of the tank and things. You want to keep it minimal. Most people, when you look at display tanks for Peacocks and Haps, they won't have anything along the bottom, or they'll have 1 or 2 stones. With Mbuna cichlids, it's a lot different. You can whack loads of stones in there. They love making territories in all the rocks and the crevices. So with Mbuna cichlids, yes, of course, you can go a bit overboard with the rocks and build a big structure in there and they'll love it. But with these fish, they're open water swimmers. They get fairly large. This tank is actually probably overscaped. I've probably done too much. When these get bigger, I'm going to have to take some out. But keep it low down, keep it minimal. Because they're open water swimmers, because they're aggressive, they're chasing each other around a lot. As they get bigger, these stones, they can do them quite a bit of damage if they're a big fish and they're swimming into them dead quick. So minimal, low down, and then obviously when they get bigger, you might even have to take some out as well. Right, tip number 8 is probably going to rub some people up the wrong way and cause a bit of upset, but from my experience, we do not keep Mbunas in the same tank as Peacocks and Haps. I have done it before. People do it, and they do get away with it, and you can get lucky. But the reason I say it is because although they are from the same place and the same lake, they are completely different fish. So the Mbunas, they should have a different layout in their tank. So they should have more rocks, more rockscapes they can swim in and out of, and it should be more of a Mbuna community. They also are I've found a lot more aggressive. So they're a lot more territorial. They hold places in the stones where they want to sit and live, and that's their territory, and they defend it very aggressively. So with peacocks and haps, they're open water swimmers. They can go over these territories that they have, and then the mboonas will come out and attack them. People do get away with it. I've seen it done successfully. I've done it myself before, but what I've had is I've had tiny little mboona absolutely drill my haps that are 4 times the size of them. So they are very aggressive. They can get quite nasty. You can get placid ones like your labs and things like that, which you know you can put in these tanks and they will be all right in there. But if you want an mboona tank, just get an mboona community, set up the tank properly for them, do it in a separate tank, because your peacocks and your haps, they like more open water space. They're a little bit more chilled than your mboonas. So yeah, my advice, don't keep mboonas with peacocks and haps. Tip number 9 is probably one of the best tips I'm going to give you on the whole list when you're keeping the peacocks and the haps. So if you're new to this, or if you're experienced in it, you'll probably agree with me as well, is the best thing you can do when you put fish in that tank is make sure that they're all males. So when they're all males, what this will do is it will drastically reduce the amount of aggression you're going to get in the tank. So not only are your males the only ones that will colour up in the tank, so they're the best looking fish anyway, but if you start putting females in this tank, then they're all going to start competing. So they're all going to get very aggressive, very fired up. If you put females in the tank, yes, some of the males, they will flare up, they will get a lot more vivid coloration on them, but it is not worth it. If you put females in this, if I was to chuck a load of female fish in this tank now, there's a very high chance that I'm going to end up with some dead males. Or even the males will kill the females sometimes as well. So always keep an all male tank. It will drastically reduce any aggression issues that you're going to get in there. You're still going to have fights, you're still going to have chases, you're still going to have tank bosses and things like that. But with peacocks and haps, always keep an all male tank only. Not only are they more colourful and better to look at, but no one's beating the crap out of each other, and you're not getting fish belly up in the morning. Right, last but by no means least is tank maintenance. So what a lot of people hate doing, I quite enjoy it personally. I quite enjoy doing it. So weekly water changes, glass cleaning, sand siphoning. So sand siphoning, if you don't know what that is, we use a little tool, we stick it into the sand bed, and what we do is we suck all the crap out of the sand with it. So yeah, it's important to keep your sand bed clean, because you can't, if you don't and it stays stagnant, you can get a lot of nasty things in there building up, which can do a lot of damage to your fish and your water parameters. So if you've got a sand bed, especially a really thick one, then you need to do your sand siphoning. Also as well, you want to do your glass cleaning. So make sure all the algae's gone off your glass. You can take also, what I use is a toothbrush. So you can use a toothbrush on your stones. You can get in all the little crevices and you can scrape all the algae off your stones as well. I'm probably going to do that at one point and get rid of some of these diatoms. But your water changes, you want to be doing at least 20% a week, at least, in my opinion. And then obviously with your sand sifting, you're cleaning your rocks and cleaning your glass. Your sand sifting, I do it once a month. Your glass cleaning, your rocks and stuff, you can sort of do that by eye. You know when it's getting out of hand and you know when you need to do it. But tank maintenance, keep on top of it. It is vital, and it's definitely beneficial to you having the best looking display tank that you possibly can.